Welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Solid Starts. Solid Starts has an entire First Foods database with information about each food item that you are starting solids with your child. And today's episode is also brought to you by DockATot. DockATot's award-winning dock is a portable lounger created for comfort and safety. And you will hear more. We will all hear more from our sponsors later. But you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page if you need anything. Check there and see if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, you can scroll down and enter your email address, and you'll get episodes sent straight to your inbox every week. And don't leave badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com without checking our shop page where you can check out all of our merch. I feel so trendy when I say merch. With lots of cool breastfeeding sayings that you can walk around town with. And now Dianne has our review of the week.
I do. And before I started, I just wanted to plug my colleague's book again real quick. This book sucks. Feeding Your Baby Shouldn't. It is a fantastic book on breastfeeding, like an intro to breastfeeding type stuff. It is awesome. Really easy to read. It is inclusive and it is a great book. Lots of pictures, lots of really cool illustrations. And I did talk to her the other day, and she told me that they had an uptick in sales. So thanks, you guys, because I did plug this a couple weeks ago. So if that was you guys, thank you so much for looking into it and for loving on it. And you can find it on Amazon. It's called This Book Sucks, Feeding Your Baby Shouldn't. And our review of the week came actually on my Instagram, which I do get Instagram messages, but this one was particularly good. So I definitely wanted to read this. And don't forget, you can also put these on iTunes, which is super helpful, or you can send us an email, badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com. I'm a little behind on the email, so I apologize to everybody, but I swear I'm going to get to it. And I had COVID.
Whenever I look in that email, whenever I look in the inbox, I'm like, oh no.
I know.
There's so many emails in there, and poor Dianne. I think I like always forget how many people actually email us.
I know.
So I answered one person really quickly because I saw it the other day and I was able to provide an answer. But maybe I'll swoop in there sometimes and help.
Well, and some of them are like, yeah, I know. Like and totally don't worry about it. But it's I just I'm just human. Everybody, don't hate me.
I know.
Well, right, so this
comes. I'm sure people understand.
Yeah. This comes from Vanessa, and I'm reading this because she had a great suggestion for us, which we really liked. It says, "Good morning. I just started listening to your podcast. I started because I recently came back to work and I'm not pumping as much as I used to. I'm going to try some tips that I got from some of your episodes. I love it. Thanks for having this information. Thanks for having this helpful information out for everyone. My only suggestion is that you specify for what age group, months, of baby that you are talking about. My baby is almost 4 months, and I wanted to be sure I'm pumping sufficient milk for this age group." And I loved that suggestion because, and I showed it to Abby, and I was just like, oh my God, I don't think we do this. Like, and I never really talked about it, or never really thought about it. We just kind of talk about, babies and certain topics and all this stuff, but we never really say necessarily, oh, if your baby is this old, this is what you should expect. And we know, we talk all the time about how babies are so different, but we can definitely discuss age groups when we're talking about things, especially about things like pumping and, how much milk babies should be getting at certain ages. So I think that is a great suggestion. And I told her that, and we kind of went back and forth a little bit about what she was pumping, and she's actually doing an amazing job. Returning to work is so hard. And I just, hopefully going forward, I'm going to remember to talk about those age groups and kind of what to expect for different ages. So if you have any suggestions of things, definitely send them our way. We're not going to be like, no, this is how we're doing it. Suck it up. We definitely want to hear the suggestions. So,
yeah, except if you tell us to not go on rants, because that's
our show.
I can't do that.
That's our format. Yeah,
I just can't do it. Sorry.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. It's literally only reason I log in the morning.
Yeah.
Because I get to
I ranted to Abby for like 15 minutes before we even turned it on.
I was like, Diane went on a rant and then I went on a rant and I was like, once again, we should have hit record.
I know.
Because your story was totally something that probably other people can relate to. It was all about a baby who wasn't gaining and all this stuff. And I can't even remember what I was ranting about. Oh, I was ranting about ranting. Right?
Yeah.
I think I was ranting about ranting. Okay.
Yeah. And a little bit of capitalism was thrown in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know me.
Yeah. So anyway. So you're going to get that sometimes, some rants. But so thank you so much for sending me that Instagram message. I mean, I know everybody kind of reaches us however they reach us. And probably about once a month, everybody, we do a Facebook Live usually. Well, the last couple months we did. And people pop on and ask questions. So we don't usually announce when they're going to be. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a big...
I know.
We kind of do things on the fly. So
I know, exactly. That's because it's really kind of on the fly. But they're also like, well, I was going to say they're always up. Like you can go back and watch it, but then we're not there to answer your question. But yeah, we should come up with like a schedule, like every second and fourth Wednesday of the month or something. And then people know.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to do that.
We can do that.
And that way, and sometimes people pop on and just ask us questions, which is really nice too. So, so kind of watch out for that.
Why don't we just do November right now? So, like, how about the first and third Wednesdays of November?
Sounds good to me.
That's November 2nd.
Is that good with everybody else?
Is that good with your schedule? So Wednesday, November 2nd, and Wednesday, November 16th. We will be live, and they're sponsored by Fairhaven Health, and we'll be on Facebook,
yes,
the Badass Breastfeeder Facebook page, and
time.
We usually do like noon, I think, my time, which is 1 your time. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Noon Central, all y'all.
1 p.m. Eastern for those on the East Coast.
Oh my God, I don't know what I just did right there. Okay.
Yeah. I wrote it down on a sticky to be lost until probably November 1st.
Until I remind her, on November 1st.
I'm going to put it in I'll put it in my thing. I swear. I'll put it in my calendar. So we will talk about real stuff today, I promise.
Yeah.
We're talking about
right now. Postpartum mood disorders.
Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, if you were tuned in, we talked about weaning depression. And that's a real thing. If you didn't listen, definitely go back and listen if you're like, what the hell is weaning depression? Postpartum weaning depression. And that is, kind of real super quick. That is when you wean off breastfeeding and you're just kind of like left feeling like, ugh, like, why do I feel so sad and so blah and so, depressed? And that is called weaning depression. And that is because of, a lot of fluctuation in hormones. So postpartum mood disorders are a real thing as well. And one of the things that I want to say about postpartum mood disorders, and this is like, if you get nothing else out of this episode today, please remember this. It is the most common problem for pregnant human beings. So it's not gestational diabetes, which is talked about all the time. It's not hypertension, which is talked about all the time. Postpartum mood disorders is the biggest complication of pregnancy. It is
really,
so
but
common.
That makes it not postpartum. Isn't postpartum after you give birth?
Yeah, but you get hypertension and stuff like that after birth too. So it's considered like an umbrella of time, like, prenatally, and then postpartum goes to like a certain time frame. But it is the biggest complication of pregnancy. But my point of that is it's not talked about like all these other things are. It is not considered. It is not looked at as an issue like all these other things are. And it is way more common. So when I say way more common, the numbers are like anywhere between like 1 in 5, 1 in 6, 1 in 7, something like that. Like if you look at different places, you'll see different things. But it's also one of those things where it's only like they're going by what is actually reported too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people don't report that they're struggling because they don't realize how common it is. And there's a lot of stigma around it. So I want people to know who are listening right now, if you are feeling like this, please do not be afraid to say something, because it is a really, really common complication that goes along with pregnancy and having a baby. And it is something that you need to really get support for, because we want you to feel okay. We want you to enjoy this time with your baby. And it's really hard to enjoy that when you are feeling the anxiety or the depression or the, all the other mood disorders that go along with it. And I know you had stuff to say too. I mean, I could talk about it for an hour, but I know you had some stuff that you were considering.
No, I mean,
too.
I was just going to talk about, I don't know. But for myself, when I had Jack, after I had Jack, I had a lot of anxiety issues my entire adult life. Like, I was on medication for it. And by the time I was pregnant with Jack, I wasn't on medication for it anymore. And I felt like pretty stable. Still a very anxious person, but I was, then I was going through pregnancy, and I remember my boss at the time too being like, "How are you managing? You seem pretty anxious." And I was like, "I do."
You seem pretty anxious.
It was just so normal. It was so normal. I didn't even realize. And then I gave birth, and I was like, I always heard about postpartum depression. You hear about postpartum depression, and I have never felt depressed a day in my life. I don't know what that feels like. I was like, I don't have postpartum depression because I am definitely not depressed. And, even as a mental health professional, as I was, as a social worker and a therapist and somebody who studied this, was like, I don't identify with this depression word at all. I was so highly anxious, and so high functioning anxious too, because anxiety can actually fuel your high functioning.
Debilitate. Yeah. It can debilitate you sometimes though too.
Oh, well, yeah. But so I was so anxious, and my anxiety, my point is, postpartum, we're calling this postpartum mood disorders because we talk about postpartum depression a lot, and some people just don't identify with that. I never did. And then I realized later on, wait, I was experiencing a postpartum mood disorder, yes, but it was anxiety. And extreme. I mean, I look back at those early days with Jack, and it's dark. The memories are just dark. The room is dark. The memories are dark. Everything is dark. I was so scared all the time. I was also having these really bad intrusive thoughts, which I didn't know until later is also very common with new parents.
Yes.
Very common. And I had no idea that was common. I was just knowing that I was having visions of chair legs going through Jack's face and him falling from a skyscraper. All of these things were not even possible to happen. We're taking charge of my mind the whole day. And then we were struggling with breastfeeding, and we were, new parents, didn't have any idea what was going on. I didn't understand why he was crying all the time. I didn't understand why I couldn't put him down. All of the things that we've talked about a million times on this show. We don't understand babies.
Right.
And I certainly didn't understand myself, and I certainly didn't understand this transition to parenthood. And it was intense. And, the fog lifted eventually, but I never really got help. I didn't even know, when you're in it, it's really hard to identify what's going on when you're inside of it.
Yeah.
And there's also no one around us being how you doing? Nobody asks about the parent. We get the baby has a doctor's appointment every day where they get poked and prodded and measured and all of this, but no one ever, maybe there's a form that you fill out and it doesn't matter. Does anybody look at it? I don't know, because
don't even
you could put I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with this. And no one ever says anything to you. So it's not it doesn't seem like anybody really reads it.
It is known now. I did I've done a presentation on this several times. Actually, I put a whole thing together on it, and it was a couple years ago, but it wasn't that long ago that this is out of touch information or anything. It was only a few years ago. But what has been recognized now is that where we thought it was called, how you said, it was always called postpartum depression, PPD, it is called postpartum mood disorders now because so many more mood disorders were recognized coming out of this perinatal period, and anxiety is huge.
Yeah.
And what they are seeing now that it is more anxiety than it is depression. And I don't know if that's just like a generational thing. I have no idea, but the things that have been put into place to monitor postpartum depression, which still is not great, but they have what's called like the Edinburgh, which is the most popular form that Abby was just talking about, like, the forms to fill out, like, how have you felt in the last 7 days, blah, blah, blah. It's called the Edinburgh, and there's like, a handful of questions. That is the most common thing that we see. I don't know if anybody else sees anything different, but that is the most common thing that I have seen and that I have learned about in the trainings that I've been in that is used. And it does not monitor anxiety at all. So when I was working in a pediatrician's office, we did do the Edinburgh. And then for a while, I was pushing an anxiety one too, which of course they got rid of after a while because, what the hell do I know? I'm just a lactation person. But they were giving it out. But the thing with it is, like, if they're not addressing it immediately, like you can't have it. Oh, here, fill out this form about your feelings and we'll get to it when we get to it and we'll call you if there's a problem. No, that's ridiculous. And the way our systems are now, like, you go to the doctor, everything is electronic. They're having you fill out forms online and nobody's looking at it. Nobody's addressing it. Nobody's talking to you about it. And really, honestly, those forms too, you could totally lie on them. Which I've had a lot of people tell me that that's what they did. They're like, if I filled it out at all, I told them I was feeling fine. And it's like, because nobody wants to be considered a problem.
Right. Well, people are embarrassed to talk about anything that has to do with mental health because it's such a stigma. Like, oh my God, like, why don't you're supposed to enjoy your baby. Why aren't you happy? You have a healthy baby. How lovely. You should be happy. And it's like, first of all, we have an entire identity shift happening. You have hormones happening. You have, environmental stresses. You have if you struggled with depression, anxiety, anything before you had babies, you can
at any point in your life.
At any point in your life, you can pretty much be guaranteed that that's going to surface again at some point. Because this is a time where like things are really, really shifting. Those like that solid structure that you created, to kind of manage life and get through it. Well, it's about to be knocked down with a bulldozer with having a baby and going through all of these changes. So that stuff is going to start to seep out. And it's not, I mean, I want to say it's okay, but like it happens and it's normal and we have to talk about it and we have to like provide people with more support. Which
absolutely. And it's one of the things too that's kind of popping in my head right now. We talked a couple of episodes ago about the fourth trimester, and one of the things with the fourth trimester is how the birth parent is monitored after that baby is born. Yeah. The fourth trimester is not just about the baby, it is also about the parent. And if they say, "Oh, great, you had your baby, see you in 6 weeks," nobody's monitoring you for that postpartum depression or those postpartum mood disorders to creep in. If they're not looking at your medical record to see that there is a history of depression or anxiety or whatever, and that's kind of a red flag, we need to watch for these things. It is really, really frustrating as like somebody who works with parents to hear people say, "Oh my gosh, this is one of the things I used to deal with all the time at the peds office." It'd be like, "Oh my God, this mother is calling again about the baby's diapers. Is they having enough diapers? They're not sure if the baby's eating enough. They're not sure." And I'm like, this is a red flag for postpartum anxiety. Yeah. If you have a mother that's calling every day for something that she's not sure about, this is a red flag this isn't just like, "Oh my God, she's calling again."
Yeah.
Like, this is a red flag for anxiety.
She's so annoying.
Exactly. and that's what I used to tell them. I'm like, this is an anxiety issue. Like, this is something we need to monitor. But, again, what do I know? I'm just a lactation person. So, but yeah, so let's take a break. And then I am going to talk about all the different forms of postpartum mood disorders, because it's not just depression and anxiety. It's an umbrella term for a whole bunch of different things. So
yeah,
we'll get to it.
I know. It's one of those episodes where like we'll have to stop ourselves at some point because we can talk all day.
There's so much to talk about. Yeah.
All right, but we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Solid Starts. Now, I want to tell you about Solid Starts First Foods database. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. This is genius. And I'm talking genuinely excited about this right now. It's just as it sounds. It's an entire database of each food item and information about it. So for example, let's take avocado. Click on avocado and it'll tell you what age your baby is ready to start eating avocado. It'll give you nutritional information about avocado, choking hazard information, allergens information, how to prepare it for your baby based on their age, and recipes with avocados. And how to get it out of the skin, because who can ever do that with an avocado?
Get out! That's fantastic.
And there are even videos of parents feeding babies of various ages avocados. And this goes for every food item. There's also information about the history of avocados. Like, I read so much about avocados last night. There's pages and pages of food. I don't even have babies or toddlers anymore. And I learned so much just preparing for this ad. And I'm going to use this myself. Like, I was already looking for recipes using like the different foods. And guess what? It is completely free. You can find it at solidstarts.com at the database. But there's also an app. I downloaded the app. You can just click on the food, and just like get all this information. So like you're starting solids with your baby, and you just like look through like whatever you have in your house, check it, so you can see how to prepare it, see what age and all that. It's so good. Go download it. I already downloaded the app. It's called Solid Starts. Just search for Solid Starts. And you can also follow them on Instagram at Solid Starts. And today's episode is also brought to you by DockATot. DockATot's award-winning dock is a portable lounger created for comfort and safety. With your baby safely docked in this lounger, you have a more manageable place for playtime, tummy time, diaper changes, dozing, you name it. The dock was designed to mimic the womb with soft padded edges, and you may have seen your favorite badass celebrities posting about these. These are really popular. If you think your baby is too messy for one of these, don't worry. The cover is washable. And at DockATot, you'll also love the La Mom and Wedge nursing pillow. Many nursing pillows are oversized and only support one position, but the La Mom and Wedge supports multiple feeding positions while decreasing neck and back strain. You also get to pick from many beautiful patterns. Badass listeners will receive 15% off and free shipping on any of DockATot's stylish products, because they have many, many more, when you use code BADASS. So head to DockATot.com/badass, and you can use code BADASS for 15% off and free shipping. And all of our sponsors and their promo codes can be found at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com in our show notes under this episode. Also at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, you'll find all of our breastfeeding resources, all of our other episodes, and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
I'll say this real quick. I was at a home visit the other day, and the mom was changing the baby's diaper before her feeding, and before we weighed her, and the baby had pooped. And the mom had like checked her diaper, like kind of looked in the side. She's like, oh yeah, she did poop. So then she ended up getting like a little bit of poop on her hands. Mom did, which everybody knows that's normal, right? Like, yeah. If you haven't gotten poop on your hands, you're really a parent. But she was like, oh, let me, she's like, wanted to go wash her hands real quick to get the poop off her hand before she started touching the baby. And she's like, oh, let me just pop her in here real quick. And she pulls out a DockATot from like one of her things. And she like put the baby in the DockATot on the couch so that she wouldn't roll off the couch. Not that she's rolling anywhere. She was like 2 weeks old. But, just being safe. She's like, let me put her. It's like, that is such a great, like, she just had it, like just down there. And she's like, here, let me put her. And she, had her DockATot and wasn't worried about the poop or anything like that. And, just plopped her in there while she went and washed her hands. And the baby was perfectly safe. And, so that was I thought that was really cool. But I just wanted to, say that.
Cool.
So let us talk about the different kinds of mood disorders that you might see with this. And one of them, like we said, is postpartum anxiety. That is one of the biggest things that we see. And I know that that's one of the things I can personally say that because I have parents to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if my supply is okay. I don't know if the baby's eating good enough. I don't know if the baby's getting enough. I don't know if I'm seeing enough wet diapers. I don't know. And it's like, constant concerns. And I mean, I know that what this is, but sometimes I feel like, other parts of society might not know what this is. Like if you voice these concerns to, say, maybe your mother or your mother-in-law or, your neighbor or whatever, they might be like, oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Which I feel like just fuels the anxiety, right? Because you're not like,
calm down.
Yeah. Just calm down.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Calm down.
Yeah. And
just enjoy your baby.
Right. And it's like, how are you supposed to enjoy your baby when you're worried about everything that's going on?
I know. And I just want to interject really quick because this is something we are also wired to be on high alert as, the species that we are. We are wired to be on high alert to keep our babies safe. And sometimes the things that we are wired to do get kind of exacerbated with, the things that we're struggling with here currently now in 2022. So it's like, it's a slippery slope where it's like you're supposed to be on high alert and we have these things that are natural and normal to feel, but then they get really out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like how Abby was saying, like things that are normal, right? Like you have things that are normal that are happening that we worry about. And I feel like people make this so much worse, like for example, let's talk about weight. And I'll have people that'll call, be like, oh my God, the baby's weight is low. And they, they're really worried about her weight. And they told me that, the baby lost weight in the hospital. And what do I do? And which now is fueling anxiety for this parent when that's a very normal process for babies to lose weight in the hospital. But if we don't know that, like we don't know normal newborn behavior, right? Like a lot of times we don't realize what is normal and what is not normal. And if we know that, that might help a little bit. Like you're still going to be worried, obviously, because like Abby just said, we're just kind of wired to be, have these concerns. But if we know what's normal, that can be a little bit helpful to maybe calm some of that anxiety. But if this is like manifesting so much that you like not sleeping well, you're worried constantly, you're going down those Google rabbit holes all the time about like what's going on. This is like definitely, anxiety type stuff that is just like really fueling. And that can manifest a panic or obsessive compulsive disorder as well. Perinatal panic disorder is another form. And that is thought to occur in up to 11% of new mothers. Perinatal obsessive compulsive disorder. And that is like intrusive thoughts, compulsions, the thing with the intrusive thoughts, and, and Abby was talking about this earlier, that she was experiencing those as well. And this is absolutely something that happens. So if it's happening to you, don't feel like you're some kind of freak because it is something that happens. And I know I've told this story before on the podcast, but probably ages ago, that I used to run like pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, when we all used to get together like normal people and not worry about it. I was co-facilitating a mood disorder support group, a postpartum mood disorder support group with a therapist. And one of the people that had come, one of the parents that had come, had mentioned intrusive thought. And like probably 3 out of the other 4 parents that were sitting in the room like nodded and were like, yeah, I get that too. Like nobody wanted to say anything because everybody's worried that how they will be thought of. It is, and usually like, that it's not going to happen. Like, like when you were having those intrusive thoughts about Jack and something happening to him, like you knew that like you're never going to act on anything. Nothing is really going to happen, but they're just there. Like it's just happening, and it's part of that.
They take over. That's why they're called intrusive. They just barge right in. You're minding your own business, and here comes just this image of your baby like dying gruesomely somehow. That would be even if impossible. to happen.
But it's there. Yeah. But it's like happening. Like it's just there. Postpartum traumatic stress disorder. And I feel it maybe you know a little bit better because you were a therapist or you are a therapist, but you were working in social work. But PTSD after childbirth was not something that was recognized for a very long time.
No.
Like a very long time.
And I absolutely experienced that with Jack, and I didn't know until I was getting ready to have Exley. And I was working with my doula, and she was going through like talking to me about what are you just preparing for the birth? Like, what are you expecting? How do you feel about it? What do you, And I was like, oh my God. And I was going through it, and I was like, I had so much anxiety and fear and trauma around that birth. And I didn't even realize it until we started preparing for Exley's birth.
Yeah.
Because I think some of it's so normal. My hospital birth that was traumatic was normal.
Mm-hmm.
It was a normal situation. Like trauma's normal now. It's so sad. Yeah. It's so disturbing. But like these traumatic situations are just normal.
And one of the other things that I want everybody to remember too about this, and this is very important, is that this is what the parent deems to be traumatic, not what other people think is traumatic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and this kind of is filed under the example of you had an unexpected C-section delivery and people say to you, oh, what are you worried about? Everybody's healthy and safe. It's fine. Like that is not okay for somebody to say that to you. If this was traumatic to you, then it's traumatic. It's not up for anybody else to decide what is traumatic. And then it ends up like kind of manifesting into a situation where like with you, Abby, you were like, well, I'm not having another baby at the hospital then. I'm doing it at home. Oh my God.
Yes.
Like
people are always like, weren't you so scared to have a home birth? And I'm like, I was scared to death to ever go into a hospital again.
I had a mom. So when I did this talk, I was one of the examples, because I like to give examples from my my real life practice when I do these things.
That's why you got the job.
I know. So when I do this, so I did have a parent. She was, I think she was she came into the pediatric office when I worked there, and she had such a terrible delivery for her. And then ended up with a spinal headache from the epidural, an epidural headache. And if anybody has ever had one of those, they're horrible. Like you can't even like put your head up sometimes. They're really, really bad. And she had one and it was lasting for days. And I said, did they offer you a blood patch? Because what they can do to get rid of that is they actually would have to like draw your blood and inject it into the epidural site. And, that kind of like heals it or whatever. I'm not sure how it all works, but it's called a blood patch. And that is something that really is one of the only things that really helps well for these to like get rid of it faster. Like it'll go away without a blood patch, but it'll go away faster if they treat it with a blood patch. Yeah. So, I asked her, did they offer that to you? And she said, they did, but I'll have to go back to the hospital to get it. And I'm not doing that. Yeah. So it was like she was willing to deal with the debilitating headache, making it difficult for her to even care for her baby over going back to the hospital because she felt so powerless when she was there. And she was afraid of what would happen to her if she went back.
Yeah. That is absolutely PTSD is real.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yes, it is. And they finally started recognizing it as a thing. And I don't understand how anybody can think it's not a thing. But, parents that are having kids are just like, I don't know, just disregarded as anything.
Yeah.
Perinatal bipolar disorder. And this is like if you have a history of bipolar anyway, this could, end up being like a perinatal bipolar disorder. Some things that happen during pregnancy is medications are discontinued. So
yes. Oh, I was going to talk about that. Yes.
Oh, good. Yes.
Let's talk about it.
Yes. And then that can be, if you discontinue your medication during pregnancy, which we know happens because we don't know like if there could be any problems with pregnancy with these medications. So a lot of times they discontinue them. The likelihood of becoming ill with bipolar during pregnancy is high. And you're also not given the right guidance a lot of the time, or you're not, okay, let's replace this with therapy, or let's do this or that. No, they're just kind of like taken off of them.
Yeah.
Off
they're
of
just
your
like, you have to stop
medications.
that. Yeah. You have to stop.
And then you end up, struggling with like perinatal bipolar disorder. And I had a client with this. It was like, she was like manic. Like I was seriously worried. Like at one point I called her provider, who actually was a friend of mine, but I was just like, I am seriously worried that something's going to happen to her because it was so bad. And like she was hospitalized, and then like the treatment that she was getting in the hospital was unbelievably bad. Like it was just a really bad situation. And she was actually a nurse. So she knew exactly what was happening with her and was very vocal about her treatment. And she was still given really bad treatment. And this is just so unbelievable that our parents are being treated like this. I don't know. But definitely talk about that medication piece.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that like if you had to be taken off of medication in pregnancy and then you have your baby, what should be happening is like, okay, let's talk about, getting back on some medication. Let's talk about, let's educate ourselves on which medications are safe for breastfeeding, which are most of them. And, but we're just told like, oh, well, you're breastfeeding, so you can't take that. No, you can't take that. And we have people who are severely struggling and suffering from these mental health issues that they can't parent, the way that they ultimately want to. And this is such a big thing. I really think that this is, again, there's so little postpartum support. So it's hard to say like this is just something that needs to be added, because all of it needs to be added. But definitely what needs to be added is like, what medications were you on and how do we get you back on those, quickly now that you've had your baby, so that you can, enjoy your life, like,
Right.
manage your mental health. It's just so, people are so flippant about it. It's so just like an afterthought, even though this is your experience and this is your life and it's affecting so much of it. So yeah, if you are struggling right now and you are, had been taking a medication to help and aren't on it now, talk to a lactation consultant if your doctor is not listening, and maybe they can help you, work with your medical doctor or psychiatrist or something to get you back on your meds.
Yes, absolutely.
Get back on your meds. It's okay.
And it's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Fine. Your baby is fine.
The last one I'm going to talk about is postpartum psychosis. And this occurs in approximately 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 deliveries. So out of all of these mood disorders, this is the least common. Yet, this is the one that everybody brings up. So usually the conversation goes, from what I hear people say, is, how are you feeling? Like from what I hear, like providers, how are you feeling? Are you feeling any depression? Do you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or your baby? It's like, that's a huge jump. That is a huge jump. Like, it is not, are you feeling depressed? Are you going to hurt your baby? Like, that is beyond, that shouldn't even be coming up, because the likelihood of it being something like that is not as high as the likelihood of it being like anxiety or depression or, OCD, whatever, panic disorder, things like that. But all anybody thinks of is, are you going to hurt yourself or your baby? And yes, that is a very real outcome, but it is not as common as people make it sound. It really isn't. And this is why nobody wants to talk about it, because everybody thinks that they're going to do something to their baby, or everybody thinks that people are going to think they're going to do something to their baby, and they're going to get their baby taken away from them. So they don't want to talk about it. And it's like, that is so far from reality, honestly. Like, yes, it's a thing, but it's not the most common thing. But it's talked about as if it's the most common thing. Yeah. It makes me angry. It's just, I mean, like, it is, do not be afraid. Like, if somebody says that to you, do not be afraid to be like, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit, but that is not how I feel. I do not feel like I'm going to harm myself or my baby, but I do feel like I might need a little help just dealing with day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is normal. There's a lot happening here.
Yeah. And if you do feel like you're going to hurt your baby, I mean, if you really feel like you're going to hurt yourself or your baby, then say it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will get help.
Yeah, nobody wants to separate you from your baby.
Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to separate you. But if you really do, if you're really afraid, if you are truly afraid that you are going to hurt your baby, then say it and get the intervention.
Yeah,
and that's a scary thing. It's so scary to talk about that and to think that happens, but it does. And, you need help.
And it just becomes, when you don't get the help, and I'm not even necessarily talking about that piece of it, but I'm even talking about just the regular anxiety. When you don't get the help, you just end up like going into this darker hole, and it's like, and this kind of stuff, like perinatal mood disorders, this can stay with you. Like, this can happen even, months down the line, a year down the line. It can kind of stay with you. So if you're like, in the first month and you're like, oh, I feel fine, it doesn't mean that that's, that you're not going to feel something as you go along. And like my client that had the bipolar, the postpartum bipolar, like, it really triggered her when she returned to work. That's when she went really downhill, was when she returned to work. And something might trigger it for you. You might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm having this great time with my baby. And then something happens and you're like, it just goes downhill.
Yeah. And we all know what a very, very big trigger of mental health issues is stress. And nobody is more stressed out than a new parent.
Right.
Because again, we're so isolated. We have past mental health issues. We have lack of support. We have an identity change. We have hormones. We have, maybe we have other kids. We also have, the societal piece, which is, we're just brainwashed into thinking we have to keep our house spotless. We have to disinfect the whole world. We have to, keep up with, all of the household things, and we don't have help. We got our partners going back to work and we're home managing all of this stuff. And that is so incredibly stressful. And then we also have a society that loves to just put it back on you. Like, oh, we're going to put you in this stressful situation. And then we're going to say, well, it's your fault because you're not managing yourself well enough.
Yeah.
And, so this is just a prime time for this stuff to surface. Either resurface or surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And, I've also had people who like maybe didn't feel like this with their first baby and really struggled with their second. So it doesn't mean if you, the first time, if you didn't have a problem, that you're not going to have a problem, in the future. This should be something that is watched for with every single parent that is having a baby, because it is so common. But it is just not. Like, it's just, and unfortunately, like we said, people are like, oh, put it back on you. Like, we're kind of left to monitor our own mental health, which, not that that's bad, but it's also like, we need help, right? Like, we need help.
Yeah, it is bad because you can't just do it all yourself. And like, it's not, I mean, unfortunately, it is up to us to fix ourselves because nobody else is going to.
Right.
And, but there are, mental health professionals out there who can help you. And you can like call your insurance and ask, for a provider that is within your network. Most people are offering Zoom sessions now.
Mm-hmm.
If you, because a lot of times it's like, well, how am I going to get there? And when am I going to go? If you have a new baby,
Yeah, I've had people say that to me too. Like, I've got kids, I can't get to a therapist. And you can definitely, like, this is something that if you are having trouble or you're not even sure where to start, you can absolutely reach out to me. I can kind of try to lead you in the right direction, because I have dealt with this with families for a really long time. So I can maybe make some suggestions that you haven't heard yet. So I would have no problem, like helping out with that either. This is probably an episode I think we should like continue into a second.
Yeah.
Only because so I pulled out before we started today, I pulled out my my presentation that I've done for people in the past. And there's just like so much in here that would really be beneficial for our listeners to hear.
Cool.
I mean, a lot of it
I already
is
wrote
geared
it down.
All right. A lot of it is geared towards towards lactation consultants, but a lot of it is really important for parents to know, like things that are triggers and things that you can do to kind of help yourself and things that maybe you can put into place prior to having your baby. So we should definitely talk more about this, I think, in another episode, because we can definitely go on. There's more. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to talk about with this.
Yes, I know. There's so much. Yeah. Okay. Part 2 coming up next month or so. And we also have the part 2 of the nighttime episode coming up too.
Ooh, yes, because we had a lot of people asking about that.
Part.
So, yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, so until next time, thanks for listening.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.